Hello and welcome to Calm the Pharm podcast, where pharmacy business meets legal wisdom, minus the headache. In each episode, we share practical legal tips and real-life examples to help you run your pharmacy with confidence. I'm your host, Sarah Stoddart. Thanks very much for joining us. Today on the podcast, it's part 3 of our dive into the general requirements of the pharmacy location rules. Today I'm doing a double requirement episode, the first one being the proposed premises would be accessible by the public, and the second one being that within 6 months after the day on which the authority makes a recommendation in relation to the application, the applicant will be able to begin operating a pharmacy at the proposed premises. So let's jump right in and look at the requirement for the proposed premises to be accessible by the public. It might sound pretty straightforward that a pharmacy needs to be accessible to the public, but what this requirement is actually getting at is that the premises needs to be accessible to the public at large rather than just certain classes of the public. For example, a pharmacy that is within a hospital is obviously only accessible to patients of the hospital. A pharmacy that might be tucked away in another sort of business whereby someone else controls the operating door, etc., is arguably not accessible to the public. So for this requirement, you need to show that the public at large, whoever that may be, is able to access the premises. Now, first and foremost, we would recommend things like a floor plan be provided, and this is so you can show, as with the requirement we discussed last week, where the entrance doors is. So you show, yes, there's doors to this place, they can actually get in. I usually would accompany that with some photographs to show the entrance doors in real time, I suppose, what it looks like, where the public is walking from. So are they coming off the street? Are they coming off a car park, etc.? And actually showing that in images to show that, yes, a member of the public can get out of their car or get off the bus or come in off the footpath and walk through these doors and access the premises. For proposed premises that might be located in a medical centre or shopping centre, it may be necessary to demonstrate when the doors of that medical centre or shopping centre open, such that the public can walk in to get to the shop at which the proposed premises are located. If there is a third party that controls those doors or the pharmacy is located in a medical centre or similar, it may be worth getting a letter from that third party. It might be the landlord or the medical centre operator to confirm that the hours which the doors will be open, but also that they don't have any restrictions on who can access the pharmacy during its opening hours. So for a pharmacy in a medical centre, for example, sure, the intention might be for patients of that medical centre to use that pharmacy. However, there also needs to be the ability for members of the public at large also to use that pharmacy and therefore be able to wander into the medical centre to get to the pharmacy at any time. Another curious requirement here is whether there are any restrictions imposed by the local council as to who can use the pharmacy or the proposed premises. So there might be, for example, an approval by a local council for the purposes of operating a medical centre and an ancillary pharmacy or dispensary, with a restriction that the pharmacy or dispensary can only be used by patients of the medical centre. If that occurs, then of course that's not the public at large, so you would need to get around that because it wouldn't satisfy the requirements of the rules because it doesn't, support the overall intention of the PBS scheme, which is, of course, to provide access to medicines to the community. So for that requirement, really important to have planned images following the path of the actual member of the public. For the second requirement we're going to consider on this episode of the podcast, we're looking at whether the proposed premises will be ready to trade within 6 months of the recommendation being made by the authority. This means that if the authority is considering an application on, let's just say, the 1st of February, you need to demonstrate, or the applicant needs to demonstrate that they will be able to commence trade in the proposed premises by the 1st of August, being 6 months later. So it's 6 months after the date the recommendation is made. So the wording is actually when the recommendation is made. Now, usually that would be at the meeting which you intend it to be, but of course, if there's a deferral or similar, it may be a later date. So working from 6 months from the date the recommendation is given by the authority. Now, problems that we do see here are leases that commence outside that period. So that is clear evidence that it won't be able to commence within 6 months. Also, fit out letters that might have dates that don't align with the 6 month period and which state that you'll be opening after the 6 month mark. So making sure your lease commencement is within the 6 month time frame, as well as any supporting evidence around your build schedule or fit out letter. The other thing that you need to be careful of is if you are very close to that 6 month mark, some questions might be asked by the authority to demonstrate that you're actually on track to hit that 6 month mark or earlier. The concern there is that you will go over the 6 month mark and therefore not meet the requirements. So it is possible, if you're close to the 6 month mark, you may get a request from the authority to show how progress is going by way of photos, paid invoices, etc. And that is to make sure you'll be ready. If you want to preempt that request, then put that information in as part of your application. Of course, things can and do happen, and there may be circumstances where it does push out past 6 months. If that happens, then you need to apply for an extension, which can be refused or granted. However, you shouldn't work on that occurring. You should really ensure that you are within that 6 month period. It is designed to prevent applications from being made prematurely. As I mentioned, the evidence that you would use to help satisfy this requirement may include your plans that have been approved by local council, your building or fit out schedule, as well as photographs demonstrating the progress of fit out. Of course, if fit out is well progressed, or if you are already trading as an unapproved pharmacy, then that's very easy to demonstrate that you'll be ready to go after the recommendation is made by the authority. That's all for today. I hope that's been useful. Look forward to speaking to you next week.